Nayara Energy, India's largest private fuel retailer, has raised petrol prices by rupees 5 per litre and diesel prices by rupees 3 per litre, marking the first increase since the West Asian conflict escalated. The company, which operates nearly 7,000 petrol pumps across the country, cited the surge in international crude prices as the key factor behind the hike. The decision comes after international oil prices surged nearly 50% since late February following United States of America and Israeli strikes on Iran and the subsequent escalation in the region. The spike in crude costs has put significant pressure on fuel retailers, especially private players that do not receive government support to absorb losses. The move breaks the long-standing price freeze on normal grade fuels and comes amid rising global crude costs. Meanwhile, state-run oil marketing companies such as Indian Oil Corporation, Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited and Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited continue to keep retail petrol and diesel prices unchanged, maintaining a freeze that has been in place since April 2022. Of the total 1 lakh petrol pumps in India, state-owned companies operate over 90% of the network. This means Iocl, Bpcl and Hpcl together run roughly 90,000 plus retail outlets across the country where prices remain unchanged. While premium fuel and bulk diesel prices have been selective, the price of regular petrol and diesel for consumer remains unchanged in most parts of the country for now. On the streets, however, fear of fuel hike is now spilling over with visuals of long queues and panic buying emerging from parts of North India. What's striking is that this surge in demand is not driven by an official nationwide price hike, but by a signal from just one private player. Zooming out, this is part of a much larger global energy shock, and the impact is already visible at fuel pumps across South Asia. In Pakistan, petrol prices have surged past rupees 330 per litre, equivalent in recent revisions, with diesel not far behind, as the IMF-linked pricing forces frequent hikes. Sri Lanka, still recovering from its economic collapse, is seeing petrol hover around rupees 300 per litre, equivalent, with diesel prices also elevated as import costs rise again. In Bangladesh, fuel prices had already seen steep hike last year. Petrol is now roughly in rupees 110 to rupees 120 per litre range, with diesel around rupees 100 plus, as the government continues to adjust rates to manage subsidy burdens. India for now is managing to hold the line, but not without strain. Oil marketing companies are absorbing significant losses to keep retail prices stable, cushioning consumers from the immediate impact of rising crude. Estimates suggest these losses could run into lakhs of crores annually if current price levels persist. The Indian crude basket has already surged well above comfortable levels, and while there is some buffer from earlier periods of low prices, that cushion is not unlimited. India's strategy at this moment is to delay the impact and absorb the shock. What this shows is simple. This is not an isolated India story. Across the region, geopolitical conflict is directly translating into rising fuel costs, tighter household budgets, and economic strain at the ground level with India, for now still holding the prices steady. On this issue, I am joined by Shweta Kothari, Senior Editor of Business. Thank you, Shweta, for joining me. Let me ask you this upfront and straight. Nayara operates 7,000 pumps across the country. What could be the immediate impact on people?
So, Kartikeya, thank you for having me. The immediate impact on people could be by the way of a greater hole in their pockets. 7,000 pumps across the country, and the biggest private sector and private player as far as fuel retail in India is concerned. Nayara Energy has today declared that it will up the petrol prices by 5 rupees a litre and diesel prices by 3 rupees a litre. Essentially, the common man will be hit. All those people who are taking fuel from some of these private pumps are going to pay more by the way of every litre of petrol and diesel they fill. So we are looking at an impact on all the customers of private retailers, specifically Nayara Energy, because remember, other private retailers haven't really upped the prices. It's also important to point out that state oil marketing companies have also not upped the prices, and they have a large number of petrol pumps and fuel pumps in this country. So overall, a small customer base there, by the way of those 7,000 pumps, will have to pay more going forward.
Shweta, my second question is, how long the government can absorb global oil shock?
You know, Kartikeya, that question has rattled the experts and got a lot of people talking. How long will this system last? How long will the war last? And if the war continues, how long will the companies be able to buffer up, and how long will the government be able to buffer up? Let me quickly, for the benefit of our viewers, tell you what sort of impact every time there is a rise in crude price has on oil marketing companies. So 90% of the petrol pumps operated in this country, which is about 90,000 petrol pumps, are owned by state oil marketing companies, including Iocl, Bpcl and Hpcl. Now, these are state-owned companies. These are public sector enterprises. Now, as and when the fuel prices increase, for every $10 a barrel, they take a hit on their margins to the tune of about 6.3 rupees per litre. Now, we're looking at crude prices jumping by $45 per barrel in the last 25 days alone, from about 65 pre-war to about $110 per barrel today. That's a significant loss to oil marketing companies. Can they absorb this shock for a very long time? We don't think so. The government does not have that kind of buffer. So all the experts are suggesting at the moment that if this war continues and if the crude prices continue to rise, there will come a point that the government will have to pass it on to consumers. It's also important to point out we are right ahead of elections in this country, and elections have a huge role to play when it comes to petrol and diesel prices, Kartikeya, because the government does not want to shock the people just as yet. So politics play, economics play, but so far we are holding the line.
You know, the Prime Minister is going to brief the Chief Ministers on Friday. Obviously, those Chief Ministers where elections are going to be held are not part of it. Obviously, you know, there are rules and regulations in place. But what is the threshold limit? Because you, as very rightly pointed out, said that there is a threshold where the government can absorb. So, what is that threshold limit? Because this war doesn't seem to end. And going by the developments in West Asia today, where the IRGC commander in charge of the naval forces, and the man who was in charge of the Hormuz strategy, has been eliminated. So I don't think they are going back, which means that the crude may rise further. So what is the threshold when it comes to New Delhi? You know,
threshold is largely determined by how much cushion does India have at the moment. Let me take our viewers back to 2022, and that is when crude was at its lowest, Kartikeya. We were taking a lot of Russian crude oil and we were getting discounted Russian crude oil. The government intervened and mopped up what we today known as the windfall tax, which is when oil marketing companies started making a lot of revenues without passing it on to customers, because the petrol prices have been similar since 2022. So, you know, the government started shoring up the revenue. Now, that revenue could act as a buffer. So, how long will that revenue last? Well, that's for the government to clear up. But 30 days since, and, you know, 25 since the war began, we have almost completed 4th week as of this Friday evening. And we are entering the 5th week. How long will the government be able to sustain that windfall tax revenue? That's for the government to answer. But it says that it is going to hold steady for as long as it can.
Thank you, Shweta. Thank you so much for joining me. So this was on point 2, Shweta Kothari, Senior Editor Business, explaining as to what this means for an average customer. The government has made it very, very clear there is no need to panic. India has got enough reserve. And the visuals which we showed you is just an indication that a small rumor on the availability or the lack of availability of petrol or diesel can actually create queues. But the fact of the matter is that the state-owned companies have not raised the prices. This has happened because a private player has broken the price freeze. So we will ask the customers, the consumers, the people of India not to panic. The government is very, very clear that India has enough oil to sustain and ride through this crisis.